I have a friend who likes to say very sarcastically, in moments when things don't quite go his way or turn out as he would like, "I'm blessed." It's usually meant as a sign that he's frustrated or disappointed, but it also expresses his feeling that he's going to have to do something he doesn't want to do. It's a way of saying that in whatever situation he's in, this is going to cost me. Many of us feel that way at times, no matter how good, sweet, and smart we are. No matter how hard we try, some things just don't go our way. Some of us, and we could all probably name people if we tried, just seem always to live under a cloud. Their lives seem like a never-ending journey from soul-crushing experience to yet another soul-crushing experience without reprieve. So similar to my friend, when many of us usually say, "I'm blessed," what we mean is, thank God that's not my life. Thank God I don't have to deal with that. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount fills a prominent place in Matthew's Gospel, 3 full chapters. The Beatitudes, which we get today, are but a small part of that, a small but central part. The Beatitudes are the beginning of Jesus' sermon, and we could say the rest of the sermon is simply an elaboration of these Beatitudes. Matthew's Gospel, up to this point, has largely just been setting the stage with very little, if any, actual words of Jesus up to this point. So beginning here, Jesus gives what is a major speech to the disciples, and presumably anyone else who cared to go up the mountain to listen. But his target audience is the disciples, and the Beatitudes seem to form some instruction to those he's sending out and promises to be with until the end of the age. There's a lot to unpack in these 12 little verses, but what seems to begin the sermon is that Jesus sees the crowds. He sees all of the people coming out to him. He sees those who've been coming to him for healing, for food, for compassion, and for liberation. Jesus sees the people who are seeking him out and wanting him. His deeds and actions are beginning to spread all around so that people, all people, Jews and Gentiles, men and women, come to find him because they're living on the edge of life. They feel the weight of soul-crushing life, and they're disappointed and disillusioned that they're not being seen in a world all too willing to cast off other people's lives. They feel like they want a blessing. So Jesus goes up a mountain. Back in Exodus, the Israelites found themselves wandering in the wilderness at the edge between life and death with very little clear direction, relying on God to sustain them, and with some of them even thinking longingly for those days of slavery back in Egypt when they could count on food to eat even if they were in bondage. When life depends on making decisions, wise decisions, in the midst of uncertainty, it's all too easy for us to long for someone else who will make those decisions for us, or we romanticize the past to be less miserable than it was at the time. We all know what being overwhelmed and tired can do to our spirit. God called Moses to Mount Sinai, and in the midst of smoke and fire and thunder, Moses alone ascended to receive the law, the covenant with God. Jesus leads the disciples up a mountain to offer them teaching, to call them into being leaders for God's people, the people God sees, the people God has come as Emmanuel to be with. But what Jesus is giving the disciples isn't a law. Jesus doesn't give it to them and then return to the cloud out of sight. Jesus is here to lead the disciples in word and deed, in action and participation, to be with the people of God. This isn't a set of rules to follow. It's a way of living, and living now, which was meant to bring about the fullness of God's intended rule to these teeming masses gathering below the mountain and waiting with expectation and hope. The focus of this teaching is blessing, but it really centers on who is being blessed and what the blessing means. The first 4 of these Beatitudes seem to center on the words theirs and they. It names a condition or situation in which any of us could find ourselves were things different. The Beatitudes are about acknowledging what the world doesn't. They're a way to see those whom the world doesn't see. They define the kingdom, whom and whose it is, and what exactly this mission of Jesus will be for. So Jesus directs our gaze to the poor, the destitute, and those who imagine a way of life different from the soul-crushing reality of each and every hard day. That can be true for any of us when our life falls apart, when one normal morning becomes a catastrophic day, and when we're told that we're no longer necessary, no longer needed, or even worse, when we're told there's no use for us anymore. On that awful day, when the world seems to come to an end, Jesus reminds us to know and believe and hold on to the truth that there is a world for you, a world where you belong, a world in which you're valuable, even blessed. Here in these first 4 Beatitudes, we find an invitation to new life, not just a spiritual hang in there sticker. The Beatitudes name a reversal of social situations which lead to despair and grief. These Beatitudes aren't even really for us, those disciples who can walk up the mountain to hear them. It's not to show that we're favored. It's not about attracting the right sort, the deserving sort, or the grateful sort. It's about those who need the presence of God the most because the rest of the polite world has ignored them, or told them they don't matter, or considered them worthless. Jesus gives us an active faith which demands action to embody blessing, which is what those next 4 Beatitudes leads to. They're blessings for those who act to build up the kingdom, to share the joy of life, and offer blessing and presence and release for others. For the merciful to be blessed is to have acted with and shown others mercy. The pure in heart, which literally means those whose heart is undivided, are those who live close to the wholeness of humanity as possible. Purity in this instant isn't sexual. It's about having a vision or direction to the kingdom as the focus of their life. That final beatitude is about what we can discover when we join together to share the challenges and joys of life as a community, not as individuals trying to get the best life for me at the expense of you. This beatitude takes seriously the challenges of lifting up others and offering them a seat at the table. Compassion and generosity will be met with resistance, persecution, and as Jesus ultimately shows, the road to a cross. God's covenant with Israel hasn't ended. Rather, that covenant of being with has been expanded, including and liberating and drawing in all people who feel persecution and hope are in need of a blessing. God offers that blessing, and we assist God in offering that blessing. It's no accident that what we read and hear in that last beatitude will be the life of Jesus in Matthew's gospel. The centrality of the Beatitudes to Jesus' mission and ministry is the centrality of the Beatitudes for his disciples and his church. It's a theme which will reemerge in chapter 25 when Jesus is ready to go back to the Father and leaves us some instructions, a refresher for when he's gone. But today's lesson is those who gather to be Jesus' hands and feet now aren't the blessed ones. Instead, they're an empowered community to engage the world and pronounce God's blessing on those for whom it's intended. We're to be the visible instruments by which God's blessing is bestowed to lift up the lowly, to fill the hungry with good things, to remember mercy and fulfill promise. Jesus shows us the way, and we follow in the way. There are people in the world who hurt other people through thoughtless words and gestures and actions. For anyone ever looking for a rule to hide behind, you can probably always find a rule. There are also people in the world who like to hurt other people for countless reasons, all of them malicious. But there are people in the world who like to help other people, who like to build up others, who support and encourage and assist others. The Beatitudes are about building up a people of God, building disciples. I hope you hear them to be about the work of building the church, building God's people, building an ongoing creation to be what God intends it to be, good. Be the blessing, and let your lives be a blessing for others. The Beatitudes begin a sermon about identity of those who are blessed because they're in the heart of God, and those who follow Christ by being salt and light to those who look for hope in the world. We hear these Beatitudes in Epiphany because a light has shined, opening up the revelation of God for all people. I wonder where you, in your life, in your hurt and pain and loss and exclusion, you could most use someone to help that light shine right now. I wonder what blessing God could offer which would lift you up, and in lifting you would lift others up too. May God bless us with the imagination to learn and the strength to live what blessing looks like.